Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the official Nerd Talk channel. I'm here with my co-host AJ Reacts 2. I'm Mind of a Nerd, aka Tyler. We are back for another episode of Originals versus Remakes, and today we are doing an episode on RoboCop. And this is one that AJ brought up to me. He randomly texted me. He's like, "Hey, you want to do an OVR this month on RoboCop?" I was like, "Okay,
Because
let's do it."
I was watching the original, and I was like, they did do a remake to this. This would be an interesting OVR. So yeah,
I,
here
I
we
mean,
are.
listen. At least it wasn't something bad, you know. At
Right,
least it could have been worse, you know.
right.
And I I really like RoboCop, so I was like, why not? Who was gonna deny talking about RoboCop, you know? So without further ado, let's get into the original RoboCop. So the original RoboCop is directed by Paul Verhoeven. I hope I pronounced his name right. Very iconic director, an interesting director. Directed RoboCop, directed Total Recall 3 years later. Directed Basic Instinct, directed Showgirls, Starship Troopers, Hollow
Hollow
Man, which
Man.
is
Yep.
an Invisible Man type movie, starring Kevin Bacon of all people. And RoboCop tells the story of a cop named Alex Murphy becoming a cop, and he faces a life ending incident, and he is brought back into the man known as RoboCop, and he must bring justice to the city that he lives in. So I saw this movie for the first time in 2022 when the amazing Arrow video set came out. I bought it immediately, and funnily I watched both versions of this movie within the span of a day because I watched the theatrical cut. I really enjoyed it, and then I think John was like, "Oh, I'm gonna watch the director's cut." I was like, "You know what? I'll watch it with you. Why not? I really like the theatrical." So I ended up watching this movie twice in the same in within the span of a day. So I haven't seen it since, and I really enjoy RoboCop. I think it is a really fun, movie. And uh Peter Verhoeven, he was somebody who he made these movies that like they had political messages, kind of. You could definitely see, the themes in this movie. Also very violent movies because this movie and Total Recall are violent as hell. Practical effects, mind you.
Practical
And
effects. Let's go.
they are outstanding in this movie. The practical effects, we always talk about practical effects for horror.
Mhm.
This is one of the examples of how to do it with action and how much it really makes a difference. And we'll talk about this when we talk about the remake. It really makes a difference, even watching a movie like Collateral, where the violence is so tame, which makes no sense because that movie is rated R. Um, you watch a movie like that and the violence is so tame, you don't really feel anything. You watch this movie and the violence is so vicious. And I'm not saying violence always makes a movie, but it adds that element to it. The scene where Murphy dies, I've seen it before. Watching it again today, I it hits. It's
Yeah,
brutal. It's
it definitely
fucking
hits.
brutal. It is brutal, like really brutal. And I've seen a lot of things. It's really brutal. It looks so real. But moving away from the violence, I think the cast here all brings it. Kurtwood Smith, Red Foreman, is the villain of this movie, and he's actually amazing in this movie. I really like him as the villain. Very intimidating. Peter Weller is RoboCop. I think does a very good job. I think I actually like him more when he becomes RoboCop
Hmm.
rather before, but I think
I
he
agree.
does a pretty good job here. Um, the movie is shot very well. It's edited very well. I love the soundtrack. That iconic RoboCop theme is awesome. I love it. I love when he's just on the scooter driving around and he's playing the theme. Um, The action is very good, and I love the ending. The ending is great. Um, Second act could be a little bit quicker with the pacing, but other than that, I really, really enjoy the original RoboCop. I think it's very good, and it's one of those '80s classics that it holds up very well. AJ, what are your thoughts on the original RoboCop?
So I was kind of in the same boat as you with never seeing the film before the Arrow Video 4K came out, and I blind bought it, and that was on a whim, and I was like, I really hope I like this movie because it's like it was like what $50 for that set, something like that, 40, something like
I
that.
think so.
Yeah, so I was dropping some money on it. So I was like, hopefully it's good. And I sat down and watched it, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I've watched it maybe like two or three times since I first bought it, and I've never seen the theatrical. I've only seen the director's cut. But from what I've been told, it's just adds to some of the violence and some of the scenes like that, but it doesn't add extra scenes to it. So that's good to know. But overall, this film is very, very solid. I enjoy it thoroughly. I don't have a whole lot of issues with the film. If I did have some nitpicks, is like before Alex turns to RoboCop, there's not a whole lot of depth that we've got, and that kind of is a little that's different with the remake, but it's not a whole lot of depth that we get. I think there's a scene where we get like a flashback to his life, his past life, before he turns to RoboCop, and it's so brief to where it's like you can't really connect to his past as much as you would like. But this one is amazing with the action. The action is kind of nonstop ever since ever like to a point in the film on. It's like nonstop basically. So um kudos to the action, practical effects. Me and Tyler, we say it over and over and over again. Practical effects is the way to go, and that's what we got here. And yeah, overall, this movie is dope. I really enjoy it.
It's good. A lot of movies from this time period they don't age very well, but
Mhm.
I defend a lot of movies like this. RoboCop, Terminator, Rambo. The Rambo movies defined the '80s. You know,
Still got to
I
finish that
think
series.
I think the action genre in the '80s, action and horror, they were hand in hand in the '80s.
Mhm.
Moving on to the remake of RoboCop titled RoboCop once again. So RoboCop 2014 is directed by Jose Padilla.
But
I
yeah,
think
Jose
I hope
Padilla.
his I hope he pronounced his name right. I think he's a foreign director. I'm looking at his filmography. It looks like he's a foreign director, but he directed RoboCop. Okay, and RoboCop tells essentially the same story of Alex Murphy. He's already a cop and he already lives in Detroit, so that's a little different. But um, these people go after him, and the accident happens, and he becomes RoboCop, and he's being proposed to the public, and we have our movie. So I was dreading watching this movie. Actually, I'm gonna be honest. I've heard no good things about this. I've heard maybe one person say this movie is decent at best. And I was like, okay. Actually, I watched half of this movie on my phone while doing laundry, and then I came back home, folded my laundry while watching this movie, and I kind of regretted it. I really like this movie, actually. And maybe it's because I went in with low expectations, but I dug this movie. It's different. It's not as iconic as the original. Go figure. RoboCop is one of the best action movies ever. But I think the movie is different enough and has a style of its own to where it's distinct enough for me. And I personally really dug it. It's not perfect, but I dug it. I thought it was pretty good. The movie is shot very well. I think the action is great. There's a combat training sequence in the second act that's awesome. Funnily enough, they used the song from Baby Driver, which I heard it and I was like, did Edgar Wright watch the RoboCop remake and say, "Hey, I want that song in my movie." Um, there's one in the third act that is awesome. I stopped what I was doing to watch the movie because I was like, "Yeah, this is fire." Um, Joel Kinnaman, I like him in this movie. I don't love him in this movie. I will say this: he's not as good as he is now with like the Suicide Squad. I don't think his acting was there, but I think he's okay in this movie. He's not bad. Gary Oldman was acting like the rent was due. Um, I thought he was great in the movie. His wife, I don't know her name. She was very good in the movie as well. Samuel L. Jackson collected a paycheck. He stood in the room the whole time. He's good while collecting a paycheck, but he collected a paycheck. Michael Keaton was Michael Keaton. I don't think I've ever seen anything where Michael Keaton is bad. This isn't something I'd recommend, but he's good. Um, I think the changes that they made work, and they some might say they weren't necessary, but I say they were, only because if you're going to now, do I think a remake of RoboCop is necessary? No, but if you were going to remake it, I think this is how I would suggest you do it. You change just enough to the point where it's still RoboCop, but it's its own thing. Um, that's pretty much it. In terms of my negatives, again, the second act, I don't know, they can't figure it out. Second act is slow for me. Um, and my other issue kind of has to do with the differences and between this and the original. So we'll talk about that later. But overall, I like this movie. I do. I could see myself going back to watch it if I watch the original. If I watch the original, I'll be like, yeah, I probably want to watch the remake. Maybe not today, but like a couple days from now, I'll throw it on. Um, AJ, what are your thoughts on the remake?
So to preface just my entire review of this movie, I haven't watched this movie since I watched it the first time in 2022. So when I watched the original, I watched the remake right after. And I'm going off of my what I remember from it and my review that I wrote back then. So what I remember is that Gary Oldman and Michael Keaton, for me, carried this film. Um, they were very good. The action, when it was there, it was dope. I don't remember it being as intriguing as the original. The action being as intriguing as the
Oh,
original.
there's a big
And
reason for that.
we have Joel Kinnaman, and I knew him from a show that I used to watch called The Killing, and obviously Suicide Squad movies. Um, he doesn't do it for me, man. As this character, he does not bring what this character needs, in my opinion. Even though the original actor that played Alex didn't really do it for me either that much, but like the rest of the movie is so good to where, I can give it, a pass. And this movie, as far as I remember, is a lot more character driven than the original. They dive into, his wife and kid and things like that. So his acting had to be there for us to connect, and it just didn't for me. And another thing, I said this in my review, and I kind of, from what I remember, I can agree. It's gonna sound weird, but this movie was too much of a RoboCop movie. And it sounds weird, but I think his character, it needed to have more depth, if that makes sense. It needed to have to connect. It was difficult for me to connect with this character, and also the villains here too. It was kind of unsure what the villains were up to, what their intentions were. And I don't know, I something just did not connect and click for me with this movie. and it felt like a shell of what the original brought.
Moving on to the similarities between the two, and there's quite a bit. The mm, the setup is kind of the same in terms of how he becomes RoboCop, and I don't mean the actual accidents. I just mean he goes through an accident to become RoboCop, and that's what happens. Um, and the plots for the most part are similar. The remake does a lot of things different, which we'll talk about, but like I'm pretty sure the ending is pretty much the same for the most part. They both use the theme song. They do. I guess that's it for similarities. I don't know. I guess there was more similar than well, when I said. Moving on to the differences. The big difference is the remake is PG-13.
Yes.
And this for some reason became a thing because they remade Total Recall, which I also don't mind that remake, and maybe we'll do an OVR on that
That's a
someday.
good remake. I like that
Um,
movie a lot. So
yeah, Total Recall is good, and they made that one PG-13 too.
yeah,
Um,
that one worked in my opinion.
yeah, I remembered liking that one, and they made this movie PG-13 also. And if I'm not mistaken, Terminator Genesis was PG-13 too.
I
If
believe so.
if it wasn't, it feels like it's PG-13, but that's neither here nor there. Um, they were like either remaking or doing sequels to 80s movie. Oh, Die Hard. Oh, the fourth Die Hard movie is PG-13 also. They were like bringing back these movies from like the 80s and making them PG-13. I don't understand why. And I'm not saying again, I had to preface this. The ratings and the violence don't make these movies good, but they are a part of what make them good. I'm not saying they are the main reason, but they are a core element as to why they're good.
Yeah, Genesis was PG-13.
Let me go figure. Um, I don't understand why they made this decision, and this is definitely one of the biggest negatives for me. Now, the action in this movie to me is good. However, there's a scene in this movie that should have been so dope, and it was for the most part. It was cool. Where RoboCop, he walks, he doesn't walk in. He busts in on his motorcycle and starts boom, 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 picking them off, and they're just pow, 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 flying away, and do you see nothing, nothing on them, and I'm just like, you're losing me, bro. You can't have somebody walk into a room and massacre people and it's like they're not even being touched. They're just they're following the cue from the dirt. Okay, now fly back.
Mhm.
That's what it felt like, unfortunately. And that's just one of those decisions that I don't understand why. Now, did it need to be as violent as the original? No, but some blood would have been fine, And I'm not saying CGI blood either. Put some effort into it. Um, that's
Practical
definitely one of the
effects.
biggest differences from the remake to the original is that the practical effects and the violence was just top notch, man. Another difference, the suit is obviously different.
The suit got to
Now
upgrade
now I love the original suit for the
for the
time.
time. Yes, I
It
agree.
works. I
For the
actually
time.
love that it's practical the whole movie. They don't really CGI it at all. I love that. That we know of. It looks practical the whole movie. This movie, I like the fact that he starts off and he has the silver one,
Mhm.
and I like the new one a lot. Now I do think it's a little too skinny. It looks
It's
like he
sleek.
has yeah, it's sleek.
It's sleek.
But when it's in motion, it
Mhm.
looks dope. And I love his upgraded motorcycle too. It's so fire.
I love
Uh,
that it's black.
yeah, I like
I
that it's
love,
black too.
yeah.
It's cool. And I think that was a change that some people might have complained about. Truthfully, I don't care. It looks cool to me, and that's all that matters. Um, Another big difference is that the movie's very character driven. We get a lot with him and his family, which I appreciate. I do appreciate that, and that's one of the main reasons why I said the mom is one of the best parts of the movie because she's really good. Um, the villain is different. So in the original RoboCop, it's like clearly stated who the villain is, and like from the get go, we know this is who the villain is. The remake, there's like three villains, and none of them are very well developed at all. One of them is Jay Baruchel. I swear, I didn't even know he was in this movie. All I knew was that Joel Kinnaman was RoboCop in this movie. That's it. And Samuel Jackson. I knew he was in this movie. When this man showed up, I looked up. I said, and I texted AJ. I said, "No way." I could not take this man seriously. No way. I can't. I'm sorry. I love him to death. He's hilarious. No, he is not a villain in RoboCop. No way. I'm sorry. Um, so Michael Keaton ends up being the main villain, and if they had just put more focus on him and worked on making him a better villain, I think it could have worked. Michael Keaton is a great actor, and I think that could have worked. But eventually, it just kind of comes down to he's a mustache twirling villain who's like the CEO of a company, you know.
S- So when I talked about this movie, in my review here, I didn't quite remember what the motive was. Is that clear in the movie? Like what his motive is and what his,
Not
what he's
really.
determined to do?
No,
Okay,
not
okay,
really.
okay.
He kind of, I feel like he kind of just becomes the villain at a point. He kind of just falls into that role. Because I feel like him and Gary Oldman are working together with, the Robocop thing and all that. And then Gary Oldman becomes obsessed with helping him. Michael Keaton's like, no, bro, like just pull the plug. I don't want to deal with this anymore.
Mhm.
And he kind of just becomes the villain at a point. It's kind of just like, but why are you the villain? Like, well, let's
Yeah,
ask that question. I also, something else that's different, the world is different in both movies. So the original, it's kind of just like uh kind of post-apocalyptic, to be honest. It's like
that's how it
Gotham City
feels.
times 20,
It
if you
is
could
kind of
even
how it feels.
imagine that. Um the remake kind of just feels like District 9. Like they say crime is bad, but it's like, is crime really bad? Is it really? Like you don't really feel the need for having Ed 209s walking down the street in the remake. In the original, yeah, I could definitely understand that. But in the remake, it's kind of just like, yeah, I mean, there's some crime here and there, but I don't know. Also, the accidents in the original and the remake are different. So in the original, he gets demolished. He gets his limbs shot off, and then he gets shot in the head. In the remake, he just gets blown up. Way to hammer home the accident there.
It's PG-13, man.
Overall, though, those are pretty much all the differences. There is a lot of difference. There's probably still a couple more. Also, I'm gonna throw this into differences because I took this one personal. The way the iconic line of "Dead or alive, you're coming with me" is different in the original and the remake. In the original, it is so iconic and awesome. In the remake, it is so half-assed and so like obligeable to where I was waiting for it. And they knew what they were doing too, because I was sitting there the whole movie. I was like, he's gonna say it, he's gonna say it. And then at a point he doesn't say it, and I was like, okay, he's gonna say it at the end. Okay, cool, this is gonna be awesome. He says it, I was like,
You had one job. One
literally.
job.
He walks up to Michael Keaton, he's like, "Dead or alive, you're coming with me." I was like, ew. Like, no. Come on, man. Whatever. Moving on to what we think the definitive version is. Um, like I said, I really like both versions,
Gave
but
both the same score.
I did give them both the same score, but it's kind of how, yeah, I forgot what movie we were talking about. You had given them the same score, but for different reasons. That's
Mm,
how I feel with these movies. I do think the original is the definitive version because it has more of an impact, the violence,
yeah,
it has more oomph to it,
iconic.
and I think the original says more than the remake. I think the remake is just a really good action movie. The, the original is a really good action movie, but with things to say, and that's what kind of gives it the edge. But I do really like both. So, but my definitive version is the original RoboCop. AJ.
I agree. The original RoboCop. I for the remake, I can't get with it, man. It's just it feels like a cheap copy of the original. I love the first one. I really enjoy the first one. I won't say that I love it. It's not a perfect movie. It's a 4 out of 5 for me, but I really, really enjoy it. It's a great action film. And this remake just doesn't do it for me.
All right. So that is gonna do it for this episode of Originals versus Remakes. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. This was a fun one to make. If you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the bell for all notifications for future originals versus remakes, as well as Nerd Talk live streams. Also, follow our Instagram. The link is down below. Our next episode in originals versus remakes will be for A Star Is Born, coming next month, which is one that we kind of just threw in there. You know, it's mainly for the remake because the remake is peak. But we'll see how the original is. Maybe the original will hit just
One of
as
the
much.
originals.
Yeah, one of like eight, but one. But once again, we are Nerd Talk, and hope you guys enjoyed this one. And we will see you on the next episode of Originals versus Remakes.